It takes a lot of ingredients to fix or build a car, like cooking, but without the frozen dinner easy way out. eBay Motors has 122 million parts. It's always the right fitment, so you can follow any recipe to a T. Whether it's a vintage Italian coupe that's classic like Grandma's meatballs or a German luxury car that's as complicated as Oma's rouladen, to cook up something great in the garage, use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.
Hey everyone, this is the Almost World Podcast. Bringing to you mind-blowing interviews with guests from all over the world. So settle down, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh yeah, by the way, if you like the podcast, please support Elmo's World Podcast on Patreon. Your support is what helps the podcast improve more and more. Okay, now we are live and welcome to Elmo's World Podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here.
To all of you listening out there at Facebook, just so you know, this is Elmo Ador Jr. I'm the host of Elmo's World Podcast. It can be found in Spotify, iTunes, and everywhere else you can find podcasts. And it's awesome to have my friend Mohammad Yunus here. Bro, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. First of all, it's really a pleasure to be with you on this show. So this is Mohammad Yunus. I'm from Kashmir. I've been interested in philosophy from a fair amount of time, now like 5 years or so I've been studying philosophy and the philosophy of science, because I was really interested in the topic of atheism and scientism and things like that, since I had this theistic background. I wanted to jump into this sphere and, wanting to understand the deepest layer of this worldview. So that's kind of it. So that's it.
Okay. Now that you mentioned philosophy of science, do you think that those atheists who use science for their arguments and say that there is no scientific data that God exists, how would you understand their position there?
Well, I would say that it's not even a good question to ask, because first of all, we need to understand the nature of science. Looking back at the history of science, what we have back in the times of Aristotle, we had a scientific method and the way of doing science, but the method itself was completely different than what we have today. Back in the time, it was what was considered science was, something which was intuitively true, and something which was commonsensical, and something which was intuitively true, right? And that was literally the science back in the days. And those people back then did have the answer to almost every question. It is really puzzling to see how these people who didn't have the equipments and the technologies were able to explain every phenomena of nature. It is right that they were wrong on many things, but the point is that the way they did science was utterly different than how we do science. Then we had a paradigm shift and the change in the methodology itself. Then we got back to the point. We got to the point where Newton's and things like predictability in the scientific theory was accepted, like, the science, the things which were considered to be science was the things, which had this predictive capacity of, making future predictions about certain phenomena, like, in physics or any other field. Yeah. And then
Mhm.
again, we had a change in the methodology. Today we have hypothetical deductive method. And let me tell you this: many people wouldn't know this, that every scientific methodology, whether it was Aristotelian method, yeah, or today's method, like we have hypothetical deductive method, all the method had certain assumptions. Yeah. The assumptions in
Mhm.
back in the times of Aristotle or Aristotelian method was like, things are grasped by intuitions, right? That was the underlying
Yeah.
assumption of doing science. And today we have an we
Exactly.
have a we have an assumption called hypothetical. We have an assumption called everything in nature has its inner mechanism. Like, for example, whatever you study or any theory you have, there ought to be something more, yeah, to what right? So the world is
Yeah. Exactly.
contained of some more in a fundamental mechanism. So what I'm trying to say is that, it is really naive to say that, we don't have the evidence for God in terms of science. But when we understand science, science is like, understanding the patterns and the regularities. And science isn't about what is immaterial. Science isn't about what is not the universe. Science isn't about what created the universe. It's purely a philosophical discussion and must be held philosophically and not scientifically. That's the reason, I've had number of conversations with atheists, for about 5 years now. And I tell them every time that, science is not the way to go when you're talking about God, because science, you can do science on things which already exist. Yeah. For example,
Mhm.
you would have to have a space, you would have to have time and intelligence to go and do science, right? But the thing
Yeah.
is, yeah, God is about how and why did space, time, and mind exist? Do you get my point? So it's not about
Mhm.
what it's about why even space and time exist, and science is about how it exists. So it is not even a right
Mhm.
question to
Mhm.
ask when we talk about God in terms of science. Science can never falsify. I just had a recent conversation with a philosopher from England, and I told him the same thing, that science can't really account for what is not scientific. You can't actually put timelessness, yeah, into a microscope
Mhm.
and test it. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I mean, the conversation
Yeah.
needs to develop, and an atheist or people who subscribe to scientism need to understand that this argument doesn't help. Yeah, if they want to extend the conversation and want to have a discussion, they'll have to think philosophically and come up with a philosophical argument against God, rather than getting entrapped in this scientific methodology which doesn't even produce the absolute knowledge.
Mhm. Mhm. And I would say that, for example, if you were to propose a scientific argument against something immaterial, then that would be incoherent, because, for example, as you said before, if God is something that is a topic that is that is immaterial, then you cannot, like, for example, I've heard a lot of debates about, say, philosophers saying that you cannot look for God and uh, uh, look at a pantry in a microscope and test whether God exists like that. That's not how it works. So when we
Absolutely.
try to use, yeah, and but I guess there's a way we could actually use science to discover ways into to understand supernatural things. For example, let's say if there was a the Bible would claim something that would be scientific, and in that sense, if this scientific claim of the Bible would be uncalled for and actually be scientifically wrong, then in that case, people could make a scientific argument against religion, against maybe the Christian God or the Islamic God.
But the problem with, I mean, making a scientific argument against what is not science is because, I mean, you would really never get to anywhere, because as a methodology itself says that, anything scientific is bound to be fallible, right? Every scientific proposition is a synthetic proposition, right? and and
Mm-hmm.
by synthetic, it by definition means that it ought to be fallible. For instance, I mean, you can't have a certain knowledge about anything in science. It's a general rule.
Yeah.
You don't trust me?
Yeah.
It's a rule in academia. I mean, people discuss it. It's called the fallibility of the scientific theory. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact is
Yeah.
that even if today you were to discover something which is non-biblical or un-Quranic, you wouldn't even you wouldn't have a case against that, because, I mean, a theist. I'm not saying that the theists are always correct, but the methodology you would be using to argue against supernatural or something metaphysical wouldn't be sufficient, because, I mean, you do have the potential, and that's in the methodology itself, that every scientific theory is fallible and it is bound to change. And that's how science have gone to a point where we are today. Yeah. So, I mean, you can't actually make a case against metaphysics, yeah, using your current scientific understanding of the nature of reality. There is a view in academia called particularism, and another view is called anti-progress thesis. The particularism actually says that, I mean, I would go to an extent and says that, the particularism says that science doesn't even produce knowledge. Yeah. It does, it gives you the best model of reality, but it doesn't give you knowledge. Not by knowledge, what I mean by that is something which is true in an absolute sense, something which doesn't have the potential to change. Yeah. So, I mean, you're right. I mean, you can actually, I mean, come up with an argument against God using your current scientific understanding, but it wouldn't be sufficient, because the methodology itself says that, every scientific theory has the potential to change, and it is bound to change. Though, so I wouldn't grant this argument from the atheist unless they would come up with a better methodology, a better method to give us the understanding of the world in its entirety.
I guess then, when it comes to science, you should only use it in terms of what science, within the scope of science. In terms of philosophy, only use what is philosophical, I guess. Then in this sense, how would you, for example, argue for the existence of God in a philosophical matter? Or in a way, I do think that we, in an absolute sense, we can never arrive at proving God philosophically or scientifically. So how do you what is your approach on that?
Yeah. So, what I'm going to say to you, first of all, I mean, the approach I take, I do not need, or I never found a reason to prove that my belief in gods are true, because I don't think it is something which you can acquire from gaining knowledge from the external world. I believe, right? And that's my, understanding of its issue, of this matter, is that, I mean, the belief in God is something which is within yourself, right? As same as the laws of rationality, as same as the understanding which you have a priori, right? So I never found a reason for my beliefs to be justified in terms of natural theology, right? You may use the rational arguments for the existence of God, and I'm not denying that. I have been using that, for for a very long time, but I don't think that, for me personally, and there are many theists who take such an approach, like in the likes of Alan Plantinga, who actually was like gave us the reformed epistemology, right? Whose real propagator was Islamic theologian called Ibn Taymiyyah, right? He said the same thing. He said that, it is not something which you have to borrow from the external world. It's something that's within yourself, yeah? And there are properly basic beliefs, and every philosopher accepts certain beliefs to be properly basic. So for me, right, I have never found any reason to prove that my belief in the existence of God is rational, because I believe that it's something within myself and I can't really deny it. The rational arguments, right? Now, yes, I mean, I can't use such an argument to actually prove the existence of God, right, to an atheist, because it's something which is my personal experience, yeah? What I can do, I mean, there are out there rational arguments for the existence of God. For example, we've been talking, I was just reading a book on objective morality in terms of evolutionary biology, right? So, I mean, the author, the point, although I haven't read the entire book, but, I just read the certain pages of it. And the author was saying that, evolution, if evolution is true, then, it can't really account for objective morality. And since as a human being, generally, we all accept objectivity of the moral, ethical values. So, I mean, these are some of the things, right? Some of the realities which are existent right now in the world of physicality, right? So we would have to account for it somehow. And I believe that, unless there is a transcendent being, right, which endowed us, whether it be rational capacity, intentionality, consciousness, right, hard problem of consciousness, objective morality, right? So all of these things, unless there is a transcendent being, then these realities wouldn't exist. Since these realities does exist, therefore there ought to be a being that endowed us with these values and these traits. I'm aware that there are arguments to make against it, right? And people have their own ways of rationalizing things, yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, but the thing is that, human beings generally accept these realities to be real, and and the principle of sufficient reason calls us for an explanation for these realities. And when if we are honest enough, yeah, to explain this, then we ought to accept, I mean, a transcendent being that were the real cause of all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Then it seems that you're not presenting arguments for God's existence, but simply stating that there are indicators that there is a God out there. But I guess then that when you say that your belief in God is something that is unique to you, or some sort of
No, it's not. It's not
conviction.
like that. Okay.
Um,
Okay. All right. So, okay, we've got epistemology. Yeah, you must be aware of that. We've got, like,
yeah,
ways of
yeah.
knowing. The first is like deduction. The
Mm-hmm,
second is induction. Yeah, and the other is
mm-hmm,
abduction. Right. So, I mean,
mm-hmm,
let's for now, let's keep deduction aside. Yeah, even though I believe that there are deductive arguments for the existence of God, like contingency argument, the first cause argument, which are very, very famous out there, right, amongst the theist
mm-hmm,
atheist debate. So let's keep them aside. Let's keep deduction aside. Let's just ask for the inference, since we do infer things. Yeah, we come to know things through inference. The entire scientific theories are based on the inference, right? So when we accept these realities, for example, rationality, intentionality, yeah, and then ask for the explanation, then I believe, right? I mean, inferring, inducing these things for like, 3 or 4 years now. I believe that the best inference out there is that there ought to be a being, right, with intentionality, right, endowing within its creatures this trait. If that didn't exist, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, which we know we are having it intentionally. Yeah, if we are just
Yeah.
material beings and it's just neurochemical firings that's going on in the brain, then we wouldn't actually account for intentionality, right? And these are the issues, right, raised by famous neuroscientists like Surreal, and other many others are there as well, like even Professor Rosenberg. I was reading one of his book on philosophy of science. He says the same thing, that if just bunch of neurons, yeah, making this firing in the brain, then we don't have any reason to explain that we are rational beings and things are happening with intention, and we have this truth bearing rational faculties that are reliable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What then in terms of epistemology though, when what kind of knowledge claim are you making of God? Is it some sort of and it's just an intuition, I guess, of
Well,
that
yeah.
of your belief
First of
in God?
all, I believe that that's the way to go. I mean, for any theist, if they want to approach atheist, yeah, and if an atheist asks for the reason for the existence of God, they don't need to give them the reason, because I believe that it's something which is a priori, right? And there are multiple studies that have actually demonstrated the same thing. For example, the research that was done by Professor Justin Barrett, right? He said that children
Mm-hmm.
are naturally inclined to believe in a natural religion, to believe in a superpower, right? So I mean, it's something which is within ourselves, and we don't really have to account for it necessarily. You may do it, right? You may bring about the argument for causal argument, the contingency argument of what you have, but I'm saying that the best thing is to do is to, like, say that this is just an a priori belief, right? Like many people have it, like for example me, and there are multiple, like, majority of the human beings that are of the same beliefs, right? You may have different gods, you may believe in different gods, and you may worship in a different way, but fundamentally you all believe that there is something, a power. Some may call it Brahman, Hindus call it Brahman, uh, Christians call it Father, Jews call it with a different name, right? But we all have a common denominator, which is that there is a cause, there is a creator that has created this entire cosmos. So I believe that the best way to go in a discussion with any atheist is that, right? Then, if an atheist were to ask for the reasons for the existence of God, then simply we would say that we have these these realities which we accept, which we all accept, you and me accept. We are conscious beings, and matter alone cannot account for conscious hard problem of
Yeah.
consciousness. Since I
Yeah.
mean, it's a problem out there. That's why it's called the hard problem of consciousness, right? So the best
Mm-hmm.
explanation to this, since you don't have an explanation, but we do have the explanation, and that seems to be the best inference for the data set, right? So
Mm-hmm.
and many others, like cause argument, like the first cause argument, the Aristotelian change argument, that every potential gets actualized when there is already something actual, making it actual, right? The first mover argument, the contingency, one of the strongest argument for the existence of God is the contingency argument. So there does exist rational arguments for the existence of God. So yeah, that's the way I believe to go.
Okay. Then, in the sense though, for example, as you stated that we can anchor, simply anchor our belief in God, in that there's an intuition happening amongst the majority of of human race, and so, but we are able to actually test the reliability of this belief or intuition that are of knowledge that we have of God, for example. And in many cases, a lot of them have reasons that of simple indoctrination, or believing in a wrong concept of God. And so in this sense, we can say that it's not really a reliable way to gain
Okay.
sort of knowledge.
Yeah, I got the question. So Alvin Plantinga has a say. So what he says is that, you got you got certain epistemic commitments to make if your belief ought to have a warrant. For example, he says that, the belief has to have a deontological justification. For example, a person, who is well, I mean, sound in terms of his cognitive faculties, right? He is like, he's a good person, doesn't seem to have any disorder, right? If
Mhm,
he explores all the possibilities out there and yet didn't find a reason to reject God's existence, right? Then
mhm,
he does have a reason to it. So I mean, it is still coming in his self that, he's not able to deny it, even after being cognitively well sounded. Yeah. The second is
mhm,
proper functionality of your cognitive faculties. Yeah. So you would have to have a proper cognitive system, right, which must function properly. And if it does, and you are still forming a belief in the existence of God, yeah, then it it must have an explanation. Like, why is it that I'm forming a belief? Like, even after having proper cognitive system working, yeah. So yeah, and the third is warrant. So I mean, if you fulfill these epistemic commitments, then your belief ought to have a warrant. So that's the way to go. So he says that, if a person has it, right? For example, a person uh, would. There is an objection to this. Like, for instance, yeah, people would say that, I may have a properly cognitive system functioning, and yet I form a belief in the great pumpkins, right? But I would say,
mhm,
but a great pumpkin, and say that that's God, yeah. But the thing is that great pumpkins are physical things, yeah. You can conceptualize physical. You can actually touch the pumpkins, yeah. So I mean, when we talk about this properly basic belief in the existence of God, yeah, in the existence of super being, supernatural, the creator, unlike creation, right? So that's the
mhm,
intuition that counts. So if you have a system that is properly functional, yeah, that is properly functional. For instance, we may have a scientist who knows everything about science, yeah, and yet has a belief in the existence of God and doesn't deny it, yeah. So he has this cognitive system working properly, and yet, right, he forms a belief in the existence of God, right? Then this belief has a warrant. For instance, I'll give you a example of properly basic belief. Is like, the belief in a past, right? We believe that past did exist. Now it's a properly basic
mhm,
belief, yeah. So if
mhm,
somebody were to come to me and said that past did not exist, right? So it is him who would have to give me an argument for what's properly basic. Do you get what I'm saying?
mhm.
So it is not
Yeah.
me. The honest is not for me to provide him an argument for the existence of past, because it's properly basic belief. So it is him who have to come up with an argument for the non-existence of past. Yeah. So same way,
Mhm,
I believe that you're a rational being, you're a conscious being, and we're having this conversation right now, right? So yeah,
mhm,
so it's a properly basic belief as well, right? I don't have the scientific sort of an, like, I can't see your consciousness, right? I can't see, or I can't know that you're feeling some way or the other right now, but it's just a properly basic belief, yeah. In the same way, the properly basic belief, yeah, which is universal, and it is still universal and is not going, and is not going to go, yeah, even if science, it progresses a lot, yeah. So that's a properly basic belief. So it's not me who has to come up who have to bring about an argument for the existence of God. It is for the atheist to convince me and give me an argument for the non-existence of God for my properly basic beliefs.
Okay, so
I
it
hope you get
seems
it.
then that yeah, what you're saying is that in every worldview, due to skepticism, we can actually discount everything, and there is no proper justification for anything in philosophically. And so,
Exactly.
even if you're holding a scientific worldview, you're still holding a, a ton of properly basic beliefs, or I would use the term presuppositions. Like, for example, as you said, causality is a presumption, as Hume said, and also the fact that why we the brute force of our own existence as
Exactly.
yeah. And so what you're saying is that if someone from an atheist perspective is presenting my properly basic beliefs as wrong, and he himself has his own properly basic beliefs, then he would be hypocritical, or at least inconsistent in that way.
Exactly. Exactly. You got it right. Exactly.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't go to an extent and say that these are presuppositions. I believe that these are the basic first principles, first philosophy, what I call it,
Okay.
right? The first philosophy. So I
Okay.
mean that's from where everything starts. So I start from I, you start from you, right? And then we build
Hmm.
up a building of beliefs, right? And we form the beliefs about the nature of reality. But the I-ness doesn't have the justification, right? So it's just a
Hmm.
fundamental layer from where everything erupts. So yeah, you're right. I
Hmm.
mean, atheist, everybody has properly basic beliefs for first principles from where I mean
Hmm.
they operate.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah,
So, and I want to ask you, because you are a Muslim, so I believe that in a way you've built made a building blocks of sort of premises from which you've gone from a deism to theism, and has led you to believing in the Prophet Muhammad and the Quran, right? So, can you tell me how you've arrived at this? But other than, maybe you have like been raised in this sort of community and culture
sure,
and
sure.
belief system, but can you tell me how you justified it in your own way?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, let me tell you that although I was born in a Muslim family, I did had some doubts, right? Like,
Hmm.
why is there so many religions if God is one? Why didn't he just, made us a one community? Why didn't he just put us in the hell? Yeah, why does suffering exist, right? So I mean, I've gone through these doubts as well. So yeah, it's not something, which is uh, apart from me. It did exist even in my own mind. So, first of all, why Islam is because I believe that the concept of God that Islam provides is like, the most coherent concept out there. Like, there is one being, yeah, immaterial, incorporeal being that is distinct from its creation and unlike creation. So yeah, uh, unlike creation, created had this capacity, creative capacity, the power, the mind to create the cosmos is something which is philosophically coherent. Yeah. So I mean, if
Hmm.
you were to go back to the Ionians and Italians, Italians, if I'm remembering correctly, Italians did form a belief about this incorporeal reality. They did believe that something material exists as one, and people called it nous. If I'm not incorrect, it was Anaximander or Anaximenes, one of these two philosophers who called it nous, the one, right? Although they didn't had any revelation back then. If you were to look at Socrates, he believed in one thing, right? Corporeal, incorporeal supernatural being, right? So go
Hmm.
back to the Plato. They didn't had any revelation back then. They didn't had any concept of Judeo-Christian Islamic God, right? And yet they formed a belief about this sort of a being, right? Even Aristotle called it a first mover, right? He didn't had any revelation back then, right? He formed it purely based on his intelligibility. So what I'm trying to say is like, the monotheistic concept of God is the most coherent concept out there existent in the philosophical or in the theological world. Yeah. And then
Okay.
it gets to the Quran. Like, for instance, I believe, right? I believe that, if one were to like have an open look at the book, which we believe that is the last revelation of God, I wouldn't, it's my firm belief, right? Although it may be subjective, but I personally believe that, he wouldn't have any reason to reject this final revelation of God. It's so provocative, it's so coherent, it's uncontradictory, it just directly talks to you. Even there are some challenges given to the entire mankind in the Quran. For instance, like we have in science, we have falsification. Yeah. So if you want to prove scientific theory wrong, yeah, just falsify it, right? And come up with a better theory, right? Then your previous theory would be falsified. In the same way, the Quran has a falsification test, which in terms of its inimitability. It says in the second chapter, it says, كنتم في ريب مما نزلنا على عبدنا فأتوا بسورة من مثله وادعوا شهداءكم من دون الله إن كنتم صادقين فإن لم تفعلوا ولن تفعلوا فاتقوا النار التي وقودها الناس والحجارة أعدت للكافرين. That if you are in doubt about this book which we have revealed to our servant, then produce a surah like unto it. Produce 3 verses like this, and prove it wrong. If you can't, and look at the surety of Allah, look at the surety of God, like look at the confidence. If you can't, and then it says you will definitely not, then be ready for the fire, yeah, which we have made. So yeah, I believe that the Quran is the thing for me. It's just irrefutable. So yeah, and there are multiple reasons as well, like the life of Prophet alayhi salam, the system Islam offers to the entire mankind, the personal experience of mine. So this collective sort of a thing, yeah, made me firmly believe in the Islamic conception of theology.
Okay. Then let's talk about what the Quran says. Like, for example, I guess that because the Quran is sort of the final revelation, right? And Prophet Muhammad is the final prophet in your own understanding, right? In this sense, then the Quran is sort of a correction from previous relations from Allah. Am I correct?
Yeah, it says, I believe, although I'm not a theologian, right? I may get certain things incorrect, but I would be saying out of my own knowledge, yeah. So I'm saying there are certain things in which in Islam, when it talks about the previous revelation, it says that in the second chapter in the Quran, it says that the woe to those who write books with their own hands and they then say it is from God. So what we believe is that previous revelation of God were manipulated. There were manly pen were inserted in the revelation, yeah, which is why Allah kept on sending different messengers and different revelations for a time. And as Quran itself says, and Allah gives a guarantee in the Quran that this is the final revelation and nobody would be able to manipulate it because Allah is its own preserver. Yeah, and that's the biggest argument of the Islamic faith, that the Quran is in the same way as it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad. Even some of the Orientalist scholars believe it. The Muslim theologians, just an predominant sort of first belief of the Muslims, that the Quran is in the same form as it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. So we believe that previous, like Jesus alayhi salam, peace be upon him, were given a revelation called the Good News, Evangelion, right? But people people inserted their pen into it, which is why Allah changed the revelation and sent Quran through Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. But we Muslim do not make tafarruqa, like difference amongst the prophets. We believe that all the prophets are or we don't make any difference amongst the prophets. Yeah. So we don't take one prophet superior than the other prophet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we believe that all of them are to be believed necessarily to be a Muslim, like Moses, Jesus, Adam, Noah, all other prophets which were sent for a time by God.
Mm-hmm. And my question would be though, in this sense, then you would because Islam, the Quran was not revealed until like the 600 AD, in the life of start of the life of Muhammad, and then then would you say that the Judaism account or even Jesus, or the account of Jesus of Allah was also revelation?
Well, of course, we do believe that, until the new revelation is sent, the previous revelation does have the guidance. So we believe that, after the death of Jesus Christ, people who clutched the message of Jesus Christ, yeah, and walked on that message are the people of heaven. So we don't say that Christians, yeah, although it's just an arbitrary sort of a label which Christians themselves put on themselves. Yeah? We don't even say that Jesus was a Christian. We believe that Jesus was as a Muslim in a sense that he believed everything what God said and he acted upon what God revealed to him. Yeah, so he was in complete submission to God. Yeah, so we believe that people who clutched those messages, yeah, and walked on that are the Muslims of the time, are the people of the heaven of the time. Yeah, so same goes for previous prophets like Moses, people who took the message, the revelation, and clutched it and walked on it, yeah, are the people of heaven and not hell. We don't believe that Quran says that not all the Christians are the same. Quran says that in chapter 2 it said that there are a section of Christian, Jews, and other faiths and people of other faiths who would go to heaven. So we don't actually deny the truthfulness of the companions of the previous prophets.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, and but then this is my question though, because I'm really curious, because the Quran was the word of God, was the final revelation of God, and then because it is God's word, it would be preserved, right? But what is the reason why, for example, Jesus or Moses or all the previous prophets, why weren't their revelations not preserved?
Well, there are ways to people have answer in different way, and to be really honest,
Mhm.
right? I would not be the right person to be
Okay,
answering these
okay,
things
okay,
accurately because
okay.
it's
I
properly
get
a
it.
theological question. I could give you
Yeah,
my
sure.
my account my own view on it. So I believe that God did send revelations at periods, right? But the people were not ready to actually grasp the message in its entirety. So
Okay.
Allah sent different people at different times with the message which could have actually related to the people back then, right? Well,
Okay.
when the time was right, yeah, for the Quran to be sent and implemented, Allah
Mm-hmm.
sent it, right? Back in
Mm-hmm.
the times of Jesus, we say that people would have not been ready to actually grasp the message in its entirety. Yes, and there are plans of God. There is wise wisdom behind every action of God. So we believe that God, in His own wisdom, chose to send different different messengers at different times with different revelations, and people back then, like evolution, right? We believe that evolution happens, like there is a change, yeah. What we are able to do now, we may not have been able to do it back, back like 500 million years before, correct? Since there was an evolution, now we are able to do proper science, like the science, progressive science, or what have you, right? We're able to understand quantum mechanics, we're able to understand mathematics, yeah. So we have now reached to a point to understand these things. In the same manner, people back then would have not understood the message in its entirety, yeah. So Allah sent different sections of revelations in different time with different messengers. But when he thought that the time has come to for the Quran to be sent to the people, he sent it, right?
Mhm. But my question would be, what was not what was revealed in the Quran that wasn't revealed by Jesus? Because as you said, for example, the Jewish people at the time of Jesus were not ready to receive what was going to be revealed in the Quran. So what was that information that they
Well,
could not grasp?
first of all, those messengers were sent for the Israelites, right? So
Okay. Right.
every messenger you would see before a prophet alayhi salam, although there are like many other messengers, but Quran doesn't mention them for different sections of people besides Israel or the people of Israel. So we believe that the Quran mentions the messengers that were only sent to the people of Bani Israel, right? Israelites.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, so yeah, but when the Quran was sent, it was sent like it says in the Quran that وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, that we have sent you as a rahmah, as a mercy to all of the mankind. So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wasn't a messenger to only Arabs. He was the messenger for the entire mankind, and he's gonna be the messenger till the day of resurrection arrives. So yeah, so that was one thing, right, which wasn't in the previous scriptures given to the previous prophets. Yeah, that was one thing,
Mhm.
main thing. And as I said, Allah's wisdom, God's wisdom, yeah, he has the totality of the knowledge, and there may be answers, yeah, existing out there in the Islamic orthodoxy. But as I said, I am not a theologian, or
Mhm.
I wouldn't have the complete. I would not be able to articulate it in its the answer in its entirety.
Okay. Can I ask you what your specific school of jurisprudence that is that you subscribe to?
Well, jurisprudence. First of all, what we need to understand is theology is yeah, what we need to understand is the conception of God and the acceptance of prophet as the last messenger of prophet makes one a Muslim. So it doesn't matter which jurisprudence you subscribe to. If you believe
Mm-hmm.
that God is one, and you believe that Muhammad is his messenger, and you're true in your search for knowledge, then you're a Muslim, and
Mm-hmm.
inshallah you can hope to go to the Jannah, right? So that's not
Mm-hmm.
something which is um, uh, which is important, right? Yes, I mean there does exist
Mm-hmm.
different school of thoughts, but that's with the fiqh issue, like the social matters, how to pray, right? There may be some small differences, but there isn't any difference of opinion in the theology itself, like the conception of God and Prophet Muhammad being God's prophet, last messenger. Even if you were to look at the Shia like sect, right? They wouldn't even they wouldn't like um, they wouldn't even disagree with this. So for you to be a Muslim, all you have to do is to accept God as one and Muhammad as his messenger, accept Quran as his book, right? Then the fiqh issue comes, like, we have got four main school of thoughts like Hanafi, Shafi, Hanbali, Maliki, right? So I mean, does exist difference amongst um, them, right? Which are about, like, how to pray, how to, like, how to make wudu, right? How to make wudu, how to purify yourself when you're up to for when you're going to when you're going for the prayer, right? So these issues, but these, I mean, there isn't any major difference in the theology, the concept of God, and and Prophet Muhammad being his last messenger.
Well, in terms of the differences in the concept of God, I think there are some in terms of, for example, how a Salafi would view, for example, God's hands as literal physical hands, and a lot of Muslims would take that as very heretical. I would assume, because you
Well,
can,
I
because
wouldn't go
when you
that
say that
far.
God,
I
Mhm.
I got what you're saying. I wouldn't even go that far because, I mean, even they would affirm the non-knowledgeability of the divine affairs. They may say that, hands exist, but they deny any knowledge to it, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, I wouldn't go that far and say that, there does exist, because these are unknown things. I mean, no school of thought would
Mhm.
actually give you the accurate answer to these things, to the
Mhm.
things which are gaib, which are unseen, which nobody has the knowledge of, like the essence of God.
Mhm.
You may have opinions from here and there, right? You may have discussions going on in the academia, amongst the different theological schools, but none would actually give you the answer how that is, right? What that is, because it is ungraspable, right? Now, you may have
Mhm.
different interpretations, right? You may have one scholar interpreting the text in one way and a different scholar interpreting a text in a different way, right? And that's something, uh, which is like which is not a big deal, because even in science discussions exist, right? You may have people, right, arguing for theories which may sound nonsensical to some scientists, but that doesn't mean that they're they are, like, absolutely wrong, right? They are absolutely right. They are with their own opinion, right? But as far as I'm sure, and as far as I am aware, that, nobody actually affirms the knowledge for the essence of God. I mean, like you said, Salafi may say that the God has hands, but they deny any knowledge to it. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
that's my approach to it, and I don't really like to get into these discussions. I have in the past, right? And because I believe that, it is irresolvable. No matter how great your
Mhm.
intelligibility is, no matter how smart you are, no matter how intelligent you are, but you're still going to lack the knowledge, absolute knowledge of the divine essence. Yeah, that's the reason the discussions have been existent from millennia, and it's still the same thing going on in the academia, and it's going to be like that. But I don't think, I mean, these issues are really important, because, I mean, we have a journey here for 60 or 70 years, right? So yeah, in that time period, all we have to do is to, like, know what is the purpose of existence, what is the truth, right? And act on it, and yeah, and spread the word. I don't really
Okay.
like
And
to
one
get
last
into
question.
these. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no problem. And to end this debate, it's been a great conversation with you. One last thing is, um, in terms of the Islamophobia that's happening, especially in the world, it's something that we need to address. How would you express that not all Muslims are terrorists, and that a lot of them are do not have this ideology. And racism is a huge thing. It might be actually inherent in a lot of people. But how would you address this issue?
Well, I would say that Muslims need to be more aware of their religion, right? They need to understand their religion. They need to act upon it, right? They need to actually distance the cultural thing with the Islamic thing, right? They would have to reject the culture that's not Islamic. Yeah, that's one thing. And second thing, like, educate people wherever you go, right? Try to have a conversation with people. Try to understand where they are coming from and try to tell them what you are, for, right? What you are about, right? And yeah, and discuss and educate yourself. I believe that, it's high time for Muslims to get educated in the matters like science, even theology as well, because I mean, this may be controversial. I would say that, Muslims haven't been cognizant about their religion, which is why things are happening. I mean, we become materialist. We become colonized. Yeah, our minds are completely and then what happens is like politics gets mixed up with religion, and then you have this eruption of mixed thought that has actually nothing to do with one another. Yeah, so we would have to understand things differently. Yes, and then act upon what is real, what is like religious, right? And then not mix things up in terms of politics, society, and what you have. So I believe that it's the Muslims, who need to wake up and really understand their religion. uh, and I believe that things that culture propagates, which has nothing to do with religion and is anti-religious, must necessarily go. Because I mean, look, the things that talks about feminism, Islam is anti-feminist, people are like, woman is oppressed. I mean, I don't know where people get this from. Yeah, maybe from culture. They look at a specific culture, right, and then they extract the thought and mix it with the religion itself. When I mean, we've been saying from millennia that these things doesn't have to do anything with the religion, but like but it's still there. Like people are being indoctrinated with that thought, and are being said that that's actually religious and not culture. Yeah, and then I say that the media is on the opposite side. Things happening politically, like there is like, it's like a political sort of a wave, that tries to suppress or portray a religion in a wrong sense. Yeah, that's one more important thing, that people want to create this narrative that Islam is demonic religion. It's something which must not be pursued, must be condemned, and things like that, for their for their own political reason. So I mean, these are some of the things which we really need to consider. And the first thing I said, that Muslims have to educate themselves in terms of religion, in terms of science, in terms of every other field which exists out there. It's just my personal opinion, but I firmly believe that this must take place.
Yeah, and it's been great talking to you, man. Thank
Same
you for
here.
your time.
Same here.
Bye.
Thank you, Elmo. Take
So that's the end of it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is your host, Elmo Ador Jr. And thank you for listening in. And please subscribe. Please follow us on Facebook. Please follow this. Please. Thanks.
It used to be hard to find the exact auto parts you needed, and that meant spending a lot of time at swap meets. It's a different game now when you can order exactly what you need from eBay Motors. They have 122 million parts, so you can always find the right fitment. Spend less time searching and more time building with the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.